Okay, I'm going to try to start just going over the quiz. The first question, which of the following students has double coincidence? So double coincidence, and the answer is Piper and Molly here. So Piper has math homework and Molly wants math homework. So that would be the double coincidence. Now there's others in there, like Rosie has math homework and Molly wants math homework. So Rosie and Molly could be, so you could look at the double coincidences to see which ones might be on the next test or on your test. Number two, when an economy uses silver as money, right? Silver has intrinsic value. Now they could use it as intrinsic value, or they could call it commodity, all right? And they could use silver, they could use gold, they could use cigarettes. And all that means is that if you weren't using it as money, it would have some other value. Now, they could also say when an economy uses paper coins, or paper money or coins, then the economy has fiat money, because fiat money would be no intrinsic value. So in the fiat money, they're pretty much saying that if that paper is not used for money, it is worthless. Okay. All right. Number three is Mia puts money in a piggy bank. Okay. Any type of savings is stored of value. But, again, they could ask if Mr. Bressler goes to the store and buys eggs, that would be medium of exchange. And then they could say, if John says his car is worth $20,000, that's unit of account. So they could ask you any of those three. Which of the following is not included in M1? A currency is, demand deposits, which is like checking is, traveler's checks is, credit card is not money, okay? It's not in M1 or M2, coins is. Now, all of these are also in M2, which they could ask and make the question a little tricky. All right, decisions concerning money is monetary policy. Just as a quick review, fiscal policy is government spending and taxing, okay? All right, so now I think we come to question 6, where we start doing the reserve requirement type questions, okay? So suppose the bank desires to hold no excess. The reserve requirement is 0.05. So I don't know, is this always right? First thing I do is 1 over 0.05, because 1 over the reserve requirement is the multiplier. I move this over 2, add 2 zeros. So I know my multiplier is 20, okay? All right, a bank receives a deposit of $1,000. All right, so if the bank now is getting $1,000, they have to keep 0.05 in required reserves, right? That is the rule. Reserve requirements are 1,000 times 0.05. So that's going to give me $50. Okay, so A is the right answer. We'll initially see the total reserves increase by 1,000. Well, I have $50 in reserve requirements, and that's going to give me $950 in excess reserves. So I am going to have $1,000 increase in total reserves. So B is right, okay? We'll be able to make new loans. Yeah, the excess reserves I could loan out. So C is right. So it ends up being D, all of the above. Now, one of the things that they didn't ask is, how much would the money supply increase? Well, if I could loan out this $950 and I times it by 20, and by the way, I am going to let you use a calculator for this, because some of the multipliers are not easy numbers, okay? So this would be 19,000. So the maximum the money supply could increase is 19,000, okay? They didn't ask for that. And all I did is take the amount they could loan out, which is the excess reserves, 950, times the multiplier, would give you 19,000. And I'm just going to erase that. And let's go on to the next question, which is question 7. Try to scroll down a little so we can see that better. Try to get a pen so I could write. Okay, so question 7, which is, if all the banks in the economy have the same reserve ratio as this bank, then an increase in the reserves of 150 has the potential to increase deposits for all banks by. Okay, so actually, I have to scroll up a little to see this. All right, so how do I find the reserve requirement? The reserve requirement is required reserves over demand deposits. Okay, so I'm going to put 750 over 10,000. This is like one of those where I said that's one that you use your calculator. Okay, so I got a reserve requirement now of 0.075. Okay. 0.075. Okay, now if all the banks in the economy are the same, then an increase in the reserves. All right, so they're saying reserves are increasing 150. How much is the potential to increase in deposits? Okay, so I'm going to take that 150 and times it by the multiplier. The multiplier is 1 over 0.75. Let me just check my math here. The multiplier then becomes 13.33. And again, on the AP test, they will never, because you're not allowed to have a calculator, they will never have numbers like this. So I take 150 times 13.33, and I got 1999.5. I'm going to round that up, and the answers would be C, 2000. So let me just go over this again slowly, because there's a lot of parts to this. Okay, so it shows you the bank has 10,000. They keep 750, and that should be required reserves. They just call it reserves. They loaned out 9,250. So I want to find out what is my required reserves ratio. So I put required reserves over demand deposits, which is 750 over 10,000, and I get 0.075. They then tell me that there's an increase in reserves of 150 for this bank. So this bank has an additional 150 of reserves. Okay, since the required reserves are already put in, the 750 for the 10,000, and they didn't talk about any increase in deposits. The only time I take money and put in required reserves is if deposits increase. I'm going to just take that 150 and times it by the multiplier. All right, so now if I know the required reserve is 0.075, I take 1 over 0.075, and that gives me a multiplier of 1333. 150 then times 1333 equals 2000. All right, so do I think table 29.2 is going to be up on your test? Yes, and they might just give you different numbers and stuff, but the first thing you can know is the multiplier is 0.75. I mean the multiplier is 13.33. The reserve requirement is 0.75. So if they ask you something like that, you could have those two numbers there. I do not know why they had to go with such strange numbers, but they did. All right. I'm going to now go to question 8. All right, let me just do this again so I can get the pencil. Scroll down now a little. All right. So if the Fed's reserve requirement is 0.9, then the quantity of excess reserves is the bank. All right. So it's 20,000, and the required reserves is 0.09, because that's what they said. So I have to keep 1,800 in required reserves. Okay. I look at my reserves, and that says 2,000. So if I take 2,000 and minus it by the 1,800, I have 200 in excess reserves. Okay. So it would be like that answer would be then A. All right. Now, let me just play out, if I go to find the multiplier, and the multiplier would be one, is 1 over the reserve requirement. So that's the multiplier. So that would be 1 over 0.09. I think that comes out to 11.11. Okay. So I'm doing this because if you get this similar chart, you know immediately that the multiplier is like 11.11. Again, you're going to have a calculator, so you'll be able to figure this out. Now, I could see a question then is, how much could the money supply increase from this bank? So this bank could loan out $200, right? And the maximum the money supply can increase is 200 times the 11.11 multiplier. All right. And I think that came out to something like 2, 2, 2, 2. Okay. So I'm just looking at a possible other question, which would be, if you had $200 extra in excess reserves, then you loaned it out, how much could that increase the money supply? All right. And again, don't worry about these weird fractions, because I will allow you to use a calculator tomorrow. All right, let's scroll down and see what we have. We have question 9. Question 9, a problem that the Fed faces when it attempts to grow those. Since the U.S. has a product, it's A. Okay, so here's the problem with the money supply. The Fed could buy bonds, and they could, put money into the banks, because the banks now have extra cash, and the banks don't have to lend it out. Okay, so that's part of the behavior of the bankers. Also, if the bankers lend it out, customers could hold on to it and then not put it in their banks and not continue to, let the multiplier work. So the money supply, and that's what you see in a lot of questions, the maximum money supply, because the money supply doesn't have to go to the multiplier if customers are not putting money in the bank for the banks to re-lend out, or if the banks are not loaning out money. So that's why A as an alpha is the answer. All right, which of the following is correct? When there is a reserve requirement, that's going to be B as in broccoli. They could hold more. As a matter of fact, a lot of banks were holding a lot of money because they, even though they had a lot of cash, they didn't have confidence in the economy and people's ability to pay it back. So they were holding more. So they may hold more than, but not less than the quantity of reserves. Okay. If the reserve ratio is 0.5, then the multiplier. All right, and we've done a couple of these already. The multiplier is 1 over the reserve ratio. So I'm going to just go 1 over 0.05. Okay. I'll move this over 2. I have to have 2 zeros. This is more of a number like the AP exam would give you, and the multiplier would be 20. That is B as in broccoli. if the Fed wanted to increase the money supply, it would make open, all right, so we want to increase the money supply, so buy boom. So it's going to purchase or lower the discount rate. So it could either purchase bonds or lower the discount rate. It could also lower the reserve requirement. Those are the three things it could do to increase the money supply. Okay. All right. I hope that was helpful. I know I went quick, but it is recorded, so you could stop it at your own convenience. And have a great day.